Welcome, everyone. Thanks for joining on the Whole Body podcast. Today, I'm speaking with Dr. Suresh, who has kindly given us some of his time all the way from Queensland. We're going to discuss things like erythritol, the carnivore, ribeye steaks, health journeys, and all the good things that are involved with looking after your body and keeping yourself well. So welcome, Dr. Suresh. How are you today?
Thank you very much, Linda. Pleasure to be here. I'm very well today, actually. Thank you. How
Uh,
are you today?
Yeah, I'm good. I'm good. I've had a busy one, but it's nice to wind down and just spend some time chatting with like-minded people, I find, at the end of the day. So tell
Mm.
me about your journey into the real food health space. How has that been? What has it felt like? What have you noticed?
Sure. Do you want the short version or the long version?
Whichever you like, whichever feels more comfortable. I'm pretty cruisy.
Okay. The short version is really I've always wanted to do this kind of work. Really from the early days, I've been encouraged to try and look at patients, prescribing, deprescribe where possible, and try and think of a better way, of doing things. The long version is basically this kind of started I think in medical school. I was very fortunate. I had very good teachers in medical school back in England.
Good.
Nutrition training is something we really don't get in medical school, and that will surprise some people, and it also won't. It probably won't surprise many.
I heard it was
Doctors.
about 2 units. Is that right? Like 2 lessons or?
Oh, if that, my probably had about 5 minutes. Yeah, basically. All I can remember anyway from medical school nutrition training was, 449, carbohydrates and protein, 4 grams, 4 calories per gram, and fat was 9 calories per gram.
Yeah.
Even that isn't entirely accurate. So that's pretty
Yeah.
much the extent of the nutritional training we get. It's very, very, very low. Um, so that's when it kind of started. I had very good teachers, and I remember my first epidemiology lectures. My statistics was a very, very great gentleman, and he basically said, I'm going to teach you all this stuff, and then at the end of the lesson, he pretty much said, "Right, well, everything I taught you was a lie. Do not trust anything. Do not trust papers. Do not trust what you read. Read
Wow.
details. Learn for yourself. We will give you the tools to actually investigate and learn, and so on." And I've always remembered that. Um, and then I kind of learned through medical school. Of course, unfortunately, the medical school system really just teaches you how to pass exams. It doesn't even
Yeah.
really teach you how to prescribe
Yeah.
medications. Really, it just
Yeah.
teaches you how to pass the
Wow.
exams. And then early days in junior doctor land, really then all you're doing is learning how to prescribe medications, follow the guidelines, do those prescriptions. You can't think for yourself. If you do, well, A, you haven't got time, and B, you don't really know what you're doing, and C, you'll get into trouble if you deviate from the guidelines. So really all it does is teaches you to follow what everybody else does, do what you're told to do, be a good little boy and prescribe those medications. But again, thankfully, I had very, very good teachers. And I did two geriatrics placements actually as a junior doctor. I remember at the time thinking, oh, great, I've got another one, during my GP training. But I was very lucky actually to have both. And I had different teachers each time, different consultants leading me. And they were amazing. And I learned very early on the power of stopping medications and the
Oh,
power of
cool.
just thinking about what is this medication doing to your patient. And I think there's nowhere that's really more prevalent that that's an issue as in the elderly
Mm,
population. Um,
definitely.
so very, very early on, I learned, okay, we need to really look at what we're actually doing, look at the whole person. Don't just look at the prescriptions, look at the whole person.
Like look at the
When
reductionist view, the holistic, the whole person.
That's it, absolutely. And
Yes.
when they would come in to take, you'd see the ED staff and stuff, writing down their medications, their drug history, their allergies, etc. And then we would go and see them and say, okay, how many stairs do you have in your house?
Yeah.
Do you use a walking stick or do you use a frame? Do you
Yeah.
have a hearing aid? Do you have rugs in your house that you can trip over?
Yeah.
Yes, the drugs are important, of course, but these other aspects are important. So really, from the very, very early stage of my career, I actually got a good grounding in that, and that really set me up for life. So I've
Is
always,
that a pretty different aspect than most medical students would receive? Is that a different
yeah, probably.
perspective to take? Yeah, cool.
Yeah, a lot
Great.
of just not going to get that kind of teaching, that training. Medical school and junior doctors, especially in the UK, and it's probably similar here in Australia. I'm sure it's similar in the States as well and the rest of the world. It's basically a treadmill.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
I liken it to one of those, like airport escalators,
yeah.
where you're not really going up, you're just kind of going along the same level, and
Wrong. Yeah.
you get on at one end, and then at some point down the line, you can't even see the end. There's the exit, but you can't get off.
Mm,
And if you do,
mm.
you're in no man's land. Basically, you're not sure whether to go forwards or backwards.
Yeah,
And that's
cool.
kind of like
Right.
what medical school is like, and a lot of people liken it to being on a treadmill. You just got to kind of get to the end, and then you can kind of do what you like or what you might want to pursue. So really, from a very early stage, I wanted to do it differently. I wanted to look at the value of not prescribing. Look at the wider aspects, nutrition, and lifestyle, and so on. And I've been kind of pursuing this over the years. And the more you do into that area, the more you realize, of course, the impact it can have.
Mm.
I didn't even realize it was even really a specialty. I didn't realize. I always thought I was abnormal. I thought there was no one else out there like me doing this. Not that I was some genius that knew things that people
No, no,
didn't
no.
know.
Just a one-man
Just
band.
yeah, basically. I'll just do my little corner of the world and try and help patients how I can. And then I actually somehow, I don't even remember how, stumbled across last year, a couple of years ago now, lifestyle medicine. And I was looking into this, and I thought, this is basically what I do. Like there's a name for this, and there's people,
Right.
and there's
Great.
people that do this, and there's a lot of people that actually do
Yeah.
this. It's a pretty much one of the biggest. It's not really an alternative medicine, but if we call it an alternative, medicine pathway, it's pretty much the biggest now across the world.
Terrific.
And suddenly there were people out there that did this, did this way of working. So I just literally just there and then went, right, I'm going to sign up. I'm going to do my board certification. I want this kind of certificate to say that I can
Oh,
do this
cool.
work.
Yeah. And
Um,
how long was that? How long did it take you to do that?
it didn't take that long, because I just jumped into it, and I'd been doing this for a long time anyway, so I had a
Right.
really good
Pretty
grounding.
breezy. Yeah.
Oh no, it wasn't breezy. No,
No.
no, no.
Okay.
It
Cool.
was
That's
it was
good to
hard.
know.
It was hard. The exam's hard. Most people pass, but the exam is very, very hard. It's like a 4-hour exam. I think 300, 400 questions.
Oh
You have to
gosh.
do a written case
Okay.
case study, and
That's intense.
you know
All right.
it takes they estimate somewhere between 200 to 400 hours of learning to do it. I did it in, I think, something like 4 months. But I was just like every night I was learning at work. I was learning when I came home. It was a pretty concentrated learning.
Yeah.
Um, it was interesting because, of course, and some of your listeners may know that I am a carnivore, of course, meat eater. Don't eat any
Yes.
plants or vegetables. Yeah, of course, lifestyle medicine, you may know, is grounded in whole food, plant based.
Yes. Yes.
So
Right.
I
Okay.
do differ
Interesting.
slightly.
Yeah.
I do differ slightly there, and I do wonder if at some point they might strip my board certification, but they probably wouldn't go that far.
No.
But I do differ, of course, in that respect. But everything else is different. I certainly advocate for whole food and the other pillars of lifestyle medicine. Sleep, mental health, social relationships, substance abuse, stress management, all of these things as well, and of course, diet, nutrition, and exercise. We can all agree these are very, very important things. But I find myself now actually moving more in towards the more slightly functional side of things. I think lifestyle medicine is a fantastic framework, but functional medicine is, I think the two things can work very well together. And functional medicine, like lifestyle medicine, is about the kind of trying to get to the core root of the problem.
Mm-mm.
But I think where lifestyle medicine almost falls down is the hanging on to the evidence-based medicine,
Ah, okay. Yeah, yeah.
whereas functional medicine is a little bit more, okay, well, we're okay with it not necessarily being evidence-based as long as it works and it's not
Okay.
dangerous. So I'm kind of going more slightly into that territory now.
There's been some huge shifts and changes in the science regarding food and intake and vegetables and protein and carbs and fat. So you've moved more into the carnivore space. So how does that look? What does a carnivore space look like?
From a personal perspective or a professional perspective?
Well, let's go with
Or
the
both.
personal first. Yeah, then we'll move on to professional. Yeah, that's a good idea.
Sure. I mean, for me, my journey has been a long one. I have had my own health issues like everybody else. I often say doctors are some of the most unhealthy people you'll meet. Do as I say, not as I do is often the phrase that's utilized. At one point I weighed, my heaviest was about 108 kilograms. What's that, like 240 pounds, maybe roughly. And I'm only 5'8.5", 5'9". My body fat, never got it officially measured, but it must have been well over 45%, probably close to 50% body fat, which is a hell of a lot of body fat. I had chronic back pain, gut issues. I mean, similar to a lot of people, heading towards, type 2 diabetes, heading towards heart disease. I had these things in my family anyway. I knew these were a problem. And of course, I knew being a doctor that, I needed to make these changes, but I struggled. I couldn't, like everyone else, I just didn't know how.
Yeah.
Nothing I did really worked.
You're just a person, right? You're just a human.
Exactly. Yeah. And of course, I never had any training that really helped me at all, because I didn't want to just go onto drugs and so forth. I knew that wasn't the answer, but I didn't know otherwise what to actually do. But then at some point, I just kind of had to do it. It was actually the end of medical school, and I just kind of said, right, okay, if I don't do it now, I'm never going to do it. I'm going to die by the time I'm 40. I just need to get this under control. And I pretty much just ate like rice and salmon, like just
rice and salmon,
basically like 3 times a day, like brown rice, frozen salmon 3 times a day for like 3 months. Like that was literally it. So talk about a restrictive diet and carnivore. Like that was like literally no variation, because this was like the healthiest I could kind of do on my budget and so forth. And to be fair, like I lost a ton of weight. I started going to the gym a lot, and I was actually pretty healthy. But then, over the years, the diet slips, and, you can't keep a diet like that forever, basically.
No.
And then work and everything. So eventually, of course, I put most of the weight back on, and then starts the yo-yo dieting for the next kind of 10 years or so. And then, eventually I lost a bit of weight again, did the lifestyle medicine that reinvigorated me. And then I lost a bit more weight, put it back on again, and so forth. And then I had a patient, one day come in and say, right, I want to do fasting. And I said, okay, yeah, great. Intermittent fasting. I've never really done it. I think it's a fad, but yeah, sure. Well, no, he said, no, I'll do that already. No, I want to do prolonged fasting. I want to do a 7-day fast.
Wow.
Okay. And I was kind of like what? Like you don't want to eat for 7 days? Like you're gonna die. Like why do you want to do this? And he was like, no, people do it. And this guy, Jason Fung, he's wrote this book and so on. And I was like, no, this is crazy. Like you're just, in the nicest way, like, no, this is crazy. Can't support this, go away. And he said, no, well, tough luck. You're my doctor. You're going to help me, do some bloods, etc. So I reluctantly agreed. And of course, he didn't die. He was fine. Fixed a lot of his health problems. And that kind of sparked this thing in me, like, oh, okay, maybe I should look into fasting. Read this guy's book, Jason Fung, very, very good book. And
Jason Fung, yeah, he's fantastic. Yeah.
Exactly. Figured this guy's onto something here. But thought he didn't quite have the whole picture. There must be more to it. It can't possibly be just this simple. But still, I couldn't quite kind of accept this as a strategy, for effective long-term health and so on. So, and then eventually this patient came back down the line and said, right, now I'm doing carnivore.
Right. Wow.
And then again, I was
phenomenal.
Like,
yeah,
dude, like you're just gonna, like, are you committed to killing yourself? Like, what is wrong with you? Your cholesterol, heart disease, stroke, like what, like, and he was like, no, I don't believe it. Like, it's not true. Endothelial hypothesis, Ansel Keys, sugar-free fat cells foundation, and so forth.
Yeah.
I call all the things that we know now, but and eventually, he kind of convinced me to go along with it and monitor him and so forth. And all of his health issues just disappeared, or pretty much all of them. And he lost a ton of weight, got very, very healthy. And
Over a
yeah,
period of
still,
time, we're talking
yeah, it
months
wasn't
or?
wasn't kind of, yeah, straight away, but maybe reasonably quick though, reasonably quick, maybe a month or two.
Right.
And he didn't have like massive health problems, but he had, getting towards pre-diabetes and so forth. And I still kind of couldn't accept this was a thing. And then I actually came across, then went to the Low Carb Down Under conference last year at the Gold Coast, and I heard Dr.
Oh,
Anthony
lucky.
Chaffee
You were
talk,
so
plant-free
lucky to
MD.
go. Yeah, I wanted to
and
go.
and he had this talk, plants are trying to kill you. And that's kind of how he says it. And I saw the title and I think, okay, I must go to this this
Yes,
this
just the title
lecture,
alone. Yeah.
and I was running a bit late for whatever reason, and I kind of was panicking, like, oh, I can't miss this is golden. And something just kind of clicked in me, like, now suddenly there was a doctor talking about carnivore. Back then, I didn't know Dr. Berry, didn't know Dr. Baker, didn't know who Dr. Chaffee was, any of these other doctors, Paul Saladino and so on in this space. So something just kind of clicked in me. It was like, okay, well, now there's a doctor talking about it. And the way that he's talking about it makes sense. Like, I know that you can't just go into the forest and eat random stuff off the ground. It will probably kill you. You can't
Yeah.
just walk down the street and eat a bush. Like, it's probably going to hurt you.
Mm.
Plant toxins are real. Yeah, why don't I just take them out? Like, I've done everything else. Like, I'm still addicted to sugar. I'm still addicted to food. I'm still yo-yo dieting. Let's try this. And so, right, okay, go home. All I'm eating is steak, basically. And then within 2 days, I just felt, oh my God,
Yeah.
unbelievable. I felt like a teenager again.
Right.
And I mean, I'm 38, and people might be thinking, oh, he's only 38. But when you're 38, kind of feeling like you're a 50 or 60-year-old, that's not normal. I think we should, even as 60-year-olds, we should be feeling like teenagers still. I mean, technically, that's
Mm-hmm.
only middle-aged.
Yeah.
And I felt like a teenager again in every way. Just my energy was through the roof. Mentally, I was amazing. My wife was like, "What the hell is going on with you?" And I was like, "I don't know. Like, I want to cook. I want to clean. I want to do the dishes. I want to tidy. I want to do the ironing. I want to
Mm-hmm.
just. I'm motivated. I'm just organized." And
Wow.
like, for the
Crazy.
first time in my life, I'd always done the cooking, but the other bits of housework I was always a bit lazy on. But now, all of a sudden, I was just doing it. She didn't even have to lift a finger. She was loving it.
Of
And she was
course.
like,
Yeah.
what's going on? And I'm like, I'm doing this new diet. And she just said, yeah, okay.
Yeah. Good.
Like,
It's good
she
to have
was
that support in your
absolutely,
household, isn't it? Yeah, you
absolutely.
need
And
it.
I asked her, I said, look, are you cool with me doing this? Because this is out there. And she said, basically, to slightly paraphrase, well, basically you're fat and unhealthy anyway. So
Nice. Thanks, wife.
she loves me, really.
Yeah, she
So
does.
why not? Like, if it works, great. If you don't feel good, you stop it.
Mm-hmm.
And because she knows what I'm like. Otherwise, she knows I'm addicted to sugar. She knows I can't moderate. So, and that was that. That was like almost 5 months ago now, and I've pretty much just felt amazing, every day
Thanks.
since.
So has your sleep improved as well? Because
Oh,
often
for sure.
phenomenal.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
yeah.
was. I mean, I was lucky. I never had any massive health problems. That you see some of these people talking about curing diabetes. They've lost like 300 pounds of weight, curing bipolar disease, curing cancer. I mean, all these things with the carnivore diet. But I never had any of those issues.
Yeah, yeah.
So I can't claim to have fixed those. But like everyone, there were times where I just wouldn't sleep. I was anxious maybe about the next day, bit stressed, mind was racing, gut issues. I spoke about IBS and so on in one of my previous videos
Yeah, you have.
episodes. And just the kind of the motivation, the energy, the mental well-being, the drive to be a good man, all of these things just
Wow.
absolutely skyrocketed.
Great.
Mm.
So you mentioned plant toxins. What would be your main ones to steer clear of? People are wanting to steer clear of plant toxins. What do they need to watch
Mm.
for?
Well, I mean, personally, for me, I found two specific things that were causing me problems was garlic and black pepper. Very
Wow,
interestingly.
interesting.
Yeah, causing me terrible, terrible thumb pain. Why thumb pain? I don't know.
Thumb pain
Thumb pain, but I
in your
had this
thumbs.
both sides terrible. And I just resigned myself to just having then arthritis for the rest of my life. I'm only 38,
At
but it was to,
38.
yeah, it was horrible. But it was, I just figured, well, my mum has it, like it's probably genetic or something. And it was to the point where I couldn't even lift weights, like even like a
Oh
10
yeah, and you
kilo,
couldn't
like a
hold it.
10,
Couldn't
no,
hold the
I couldn't
weights.
grip. It was too
Yeah.
painful. Like a 10
Gosh,
kilo, not even like, we're not talking 50 kilos, we're talking like 10 kilos. I couldn't even properly grip it.
gosh.
Um, and so I was like, well, like, what do I do here? Like, I can't really exercise and this is just disaster, but what can I do? And then I went carnivore and I was like, oh, hang on, my thumbs don't even hurt anymore. What the hell's up with this?
I just noticed all of a sudden, like
Yeah,
all of
just
a sudden it
gone.
wasn't there, right?
So
Yeah,
suddenly I was like,
yeah.
oh, there's no pain. What's this? And then I ended up putting black pepper on some eggs, I think it was. And I was just like, oh my God, my thumbs are on fire. What is going on here? And then I realized, well,
Gosh.
the only thing I've put back in is black pepper.
So black and
Um,
white.
and then the same,
Yes.
to be fair, I haven't tried white pepper, but it's meant to be a low oxalate compared to black
Yes.
pepper, which is high oxalate, and we'll talk about that. And then garlic separately seemed to cause me the same issue. Now, I would have never have known that those two things were an issue separately if I'd not gone carnivore,
Yeah,
because it
of
seems like
course.
maybe I would have gone without black pepper, but then garlic would have still been there. Because I
Yeah.
put these on everything. I mean, I was obsessed with garlic and black pepper and cayenne pepper as well. That also causes me terrible heartburn.
Mm,
I never would have known because I was still eating the other two or three of these things. So taking them all out then allowed me to work out what is actually causing me a problem. And
mhm.
that's what I think carnivore is great for, is really just that true elimination diet. So I mean, to answer your question, sorry, I kind of went off on a
That's all right.
tangent
It's
there.
fine.
I mean, certainly one of the bigger ones that I'm finding myself talking to people about lately is oxalates.
Yeah, it's big, isn't
Um,
it?
Absolutely. Oxalates are a real issue as far as a plant toxin is concerned. And there is debate out there as to the severity of this and how much issue these can cause. You know, what I often say to my patients is anyone that works in this kind of space will tell you these are disastrous.
That's what
Anyone that,
I've heard. Yeah.
yeah, anyone that doesn't work in this space, that's just generically saying oxalates, whatever, will tell you that, oh, they're not really that bad. Don't worry about them. And I think it's similar for things like lectins. Of course, we know people like Dr. Gundry. People probably have heard of Dr. Gundry.
Have.
He's all about the lectins as well. He's kind of hung his hat on lectins there. We know these can cause issues as well. So I mean, examples of lectins, of course, you know, kidney beans full of lectins.
Yes. Oh,
If
yes.
you
They're
go and
terrible.
eat raw kidney beans, you know, you've got a risk of serious severe illness and possibly death
Absolutely.
if you eat
Absolutely.
raw kidney beans.
Yeah.
Even just, you know, slightly undercooked, they can cause severe GI
And
upset,
we don't know
plantar
this. We
diarrhea,
don't
and
know this as a
you know.
general population. We don't know this.
Well,
It's crazy.
we do in a way, because I mean, I think a lot of people know if you just go and eat raw kidney beans, they're not good for you. You have to cook them. But the messaging there is, well, if you cook them, they're fine.
Yeah.
But that's actually not the case, because you don't get rid of all of these plant
Of
toxins. You
them.
don't get rid of
Yeah.
all of the lectins, so they can still cause some issue. And lectins are certainly, you know, implicated in things like leaky gut syndrome, you know, severe bowel
Yeah.
issues, IBS for
Yeah.
sure. And there's even people talking about them, you know, potentially implicated in cardiovascular disease, stroke, cancer, you know, you name it. Oxalates are a huge problem as well. Of course, we spoke about that. Spinach is probably the biggest one there. You know, spinach,
And
kale,
we all have it on our
uh,
breakfast, steamed spinach to
yeah,
start the day.
you know,
Yeah.
spinach, kale, Swiss chard, you know, beet, all these things. You know, people are then juicing them and then getting the absolute full force of these
Concentrate.
oxalates. You know,
Yeah.
raw oxalates, and it's just disastrous for the body. Um, if you cook them, so you cook your spinach, it does reduce them significantly, but it still doesn't get rid of them entirely.
Yeah.
And I would argue a poison is a poison. You know, do we want any poison?
Mm-mm.
Maybe a little bit's not going to harm us that much, but still a poison at the end of the day. You know,
It's
if an
true.
insect goes and takes a bite of a spinach, it will die because the oxalates just overwhelm its nervous system.
Well, most
We're bigger, we
medications,
can manage, but
yes,
do we want to manage? That's the question.
but most medications are derived from plants, aren't they? All the
They are.
pharmaceutical drugs, they're all derived from plants. So they do have an effect on us either
Oh, they
way.
do.
Yeah, they
They
do. They
do.
do.
Absolutely. Yeah.
You mentioned having a sugar addiction. I can fall into that category as well and I think it's probably fair to say that a large percentage of the population could fall into that hat because it's
Yeah.
just everywhere, isn't it?
Oh,
So
it absolutely is.
how did you overcome that?
I would say I haven't
Yeah, right. I
overcome
know
it,
what the feeling. I know
actually.
that feeling. Yeah.
Yeah. I think it would be disingenuous of me to say that I have overcome that. I think I'll always be a sugar addict.
Mm.
Yeah, I'm a reformed sugar addict. I was listening to, I think it was maybe Dr. Baker's podcast, the Rivera podcast. I can't remember the guest name now. I apologize if this person's listening at all. And he was saying that as an alcoholic, you're never not an alcoholic. You're just an alcoholic without a drink in your hand.
Yeah.
Um,
Right.
and that I think is like me for sugar, that if I haven't got sugar in my hand, I'm fine. The moment I put that into my body, there's going to be a problem. But it's very hard because sugar's everywhere.
Mm.
It's in
Mm.
everything. And I was having this conversation with a patient today about sugar addiction, and we were musing on it, and we were saying, it's everywhere, and yeah, it's also socially acceptable.
Yes.
And
Yes.
this patient I was speaking to today, he's got basically, diabetes, and he's trying hard, he's trying carnivore. Yeah, after work, his mates are just, oh, let's go for an ice cream. It's been a hot day,
Wow.
and
So
and
easy.
he's just like, oh, I know I shouldn't, but okay, fine. One bit won't hurt me. But if that was cocaine, if that was meth, and I'm certainly not advocating for that, but like that would be socially unacceptable to say, oh, now we've clocked off work, let's go for a bit of meth.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sugar, it's standard,
It's
it's
different because it's as
perfectly
addictive.
fine.
It's as addictive as those hardcore drugs, isn't it?
Well, certainly
Sugar.
there's rat studies and my studies that have shown that yes, it's more addictive actually than
Wow.
cocaine, which is
Yeah.
crazy. But it's a socially acceptable drug, and it's a drug that is pushed on us. It's a drug that is marketed to us. It's on the TV.
Yes.
Can you imagine
Absolutely.
cocaine being on the TV, being marketed to people? You know, and it's in the
And
shops,
and
and
sugar's sneaky
you
because
know,
it's in, if you eat white pasta or you eat white
yeah,
bread or you eat rice
yeah,
or you eat
it's
sweet potatoes, it all turns to
yeah,
sugar. So I think
yeah,
people are stuck with the concept of the white sugar grain.
yeah,
That's how they view sugar, but really it's anything that you eat that's a carbohydrate will,
yeah,
become sugar in your gut.
yeah. Basically, it's pretty much all
Pretty much
carbohydrates
all of
there.
them. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. But it's also there's just predatory marketing,
Oh,
as well.
absolutely.
Like we went to the supermarket on the way back from work to pick up some stuff for the kids and for the school lunches. And, it's just like every aisle is just this super bright, colorful, buy me, or they're always on special. That's only the place where there's
It's
specials,
cheap as
almost
chips. They're
always.
always
It's
cheap sugar
so
foods.
cheap. And then you finally get around the store and then you get to the checkout and you're like, oh, thank God, And then what's there
Yeah,
at the
we're out of
checkout?
there.
Sugar. There's sugar at the checkout.
Oh, there is.
Come and buy these gums and these Mars bars, and you're like these. It's just you're bombarded with this advertising, and it's just predatory. And they know that these foods are addictive. They know that they're
Mm-mm.
unhealthy,
It
yet
is.
they market them. And I think the retailers have a role in that, to be honest, as well, because they're the ones that are putting it by the checkouts,
So the
knowing that
sugar
the
tax, the
kids can
sugar
get it.
tax that gets dished about in the media from time to time might make a difference
It it,
eventually.
it might, and
Might bring an awareness.
it might bring an awareness. I mean, this is touted as a potential fix. I mean, on one side, people argue, of course, that people should have free choice to do what they like, and we should be educating rather than punishing. Other people argue that all it does is punish people on low income who need those kind of carbohydrate food, pastas
Cheaper
and breads
foods.
and so forth, which I can somewhat understand, of course. And others, of course, argue, well, if anyone can afford it, they're not going to care if it costs another 20 cents. They're still going to buy it. I disagree with the notion though that it's cheaper to buy, poorly nutritious carbs.
I do
When you
too.
actually, and we spoke about this on when you came onto my show.
Yeah.
I think, when you look at the nutrition, pound for pound, so to speak, meat and animal-based nutrition is so much more nutritious for the cost rather than just
And you don't eat so
an
much.
empty packet. You don't eat as much. It's far more nutritious. And okay, you might get fewer calories, but calories is not all that matters. Nutrition matters more than calories.
It sure
And
does.
people needs to be, shown that you can actually buy cheap animal-based products, especially if you're working in the specials. And sometimes they do appear. And you don't have to always go for those cheaper things. But that is a criticism of the sugar tax, is it unfairly penalizes people on low incomes.
Yeah.
So,
Okay.
yeah.
Fair enough. And it's also drinks. People drink fruit juice like it's that pure
Oh yeah.
fructose, sugary little event going into your body. And little kids drinking fruit juice, it makes me cry.
Absolutely.
Makes me
Absolutely.
sad.
Well, of course, these are marketed as being healthy because it's just fruit. It's one of your 5 a day. I mean, 5 a day is totally bogus anyway. I mean, that's not evidence based. There's nothing evidence based about 5 a day. It's just again a catchphrase that seemed like a good idea.
Yeah.
And how can some sugary drink? You look at the ingredients. It's like 1% real orange or something. It's like
Yeah, it's true. It's true.
this is not a 5 a day.
It's not even orange juice. It's just colored. Yeah.
Literally not. It's just orange juice. Like, it's not orange juice.
So one of the ways that people try and get themselves off sugar is to use things like monk fruits, erythritols, what are the other ones? Stevia. So you were mentioning that you've just been looking at erythritol particularly. What can you share today?
Yeah.
Do you have some info for us?
Yeah, absolutely. So I was just in the process of writing up another episode for my podcast on erythritol, because it's been in the news recently.
It has.
And this is all because there was a study that was published very recently in Nature Medicine journal. I think last month, I believe, February. So it's very topical. Basically saying that erythritol may not be as good as we think. Erythritol is widely being held as a kind of a savior of sweeteners,
like a stepping stone. I always think of it as.
Well, that's one thing. That's certainly a criticism that I would have, is a stepping stone into sugar addiction. Because the kind of the older advice is that erythritol doesn't raise glucose, it doesn't raise blood glucose, doesn't raise blood insulin, and therefore doesn't contribute to diabetes. Therefore, as a replacement for sugar, lowers cardiovascular risk, because we're not having glucose rising or insulin rising. Now, I think that's slightly disingenuous to say that erythritol lowers cardiovascular risk, because that's, as far as I know, never been studied as an endpoint.
So
it's simply just we're not giving sugar, therefore we're lowering cardiovascular risk. Well, if you just don't eat sugar, well, you're lowering cardiovascular risk anyway. So erythritol versus nothing, as far as I know, hasn't been studied. So this study came out, and it basically said they looked at just over 4,000 patients across 3 cohorts, and they found that the risk of poor cardiovascular outcomes was significantly increased.
Right.
There has been criticism, though, of this paper. One of the criticisms is that it was quite weak data, that there was not many patients. 4,000 patients is not a lot. And another criticism that certainly I had when I looked into this was they only used a single one-off blood measurement for erythritol as a marker of how much erythritol people were consuming. So if it was elevated, then they followed them on to then look at what happened down the line. So we don't know if they carried on eating erythritol. We don't know how long they'd been eating erythritol for.
Right.
And we don't know if they had stopped, then what the changes would have been, and so forth.
And what other lifestyle factors influence those blood tests? Yeah.
They didn't really mention that much of that. So this paper has been kind of criticized. It's not particularly robust. I think what it does do, though, is it raises the question, are these kind of artificial sweeteners safe for people?
Safe,
and just because it doesn't maybe raise the blood glucose, that's not enough, I think, to say these things are actually safe. And of course, we know sweetness is addictive. We know that.
Yes.
And so it's
Yes.
likely to then lead to poorer health choices and so on. And that's the thing that's often hidden from these kind of studies is the knock-on effects there. What they did conclude, and I think was relatively accurate, I was looking at the paper, was erythritol is associated with a higher cardiovascular risk. And they said
Right.
purely erythritol increases the risk of thrombus formation in
Right.
vitro, basically,
Yeah. Yeah.
which means purely directly erythritol can increase your risk of stroke and cardiovascular risk.
Yes.
How much and for how long, we don't know.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
the likelihood is that yes, consumption of erythritol probably does actually increase your
The
risk.
same as sugar, or has that not been?
That wasn't studied
That wasn't
again. So
studied. Yeah.
yeah, so this is the way nutritional science works nowadays. We don't have those randomized control trials. We don't have those head-to-head
Right.
double-blind, studies and so on. A lot of it is on epidemiological studies. And the authors of this paper, again, I feel like they're being. I feel like I agree with the point they were trying to make, that
Yes.
erythritol is not good, but
Yeah.
I think they're attracting criticism because the way that they've done the research in the paper, they basically criticize other people for doing epidemiological studies, which we know are relatively low evidence. But then they've basically said, well, we just assume essentially that a one-off erythritol result is indicative of what they've been doing for their whole life or the rest of their life, which is a big assumption to make.
Sure.
And that, I think, is a criticism. So I think they could have asked people a bit better, what have you eaten in the past? What are you still eating? And so forth. They would have given it maybe a little bit more credence there. But it's interesting that you mentioned stevia, monk fruit, and so on. So when I was looking into this, people, I didn't
Yeah.
even realize this. The majority of stevia products on the market, because stevia is not an ingredient necessarily in and of itself,
No.
and neither is
Okay.
monk fruit, apparently. The majority of stevia and monk fruit products or containing products, actually, the majority of that is erythritol,
Oh, truly. Wow.
which I didn't even
We've
know.
been fooled. It's like
I
It's
know.
like they say, be careful of the olive oil you buy because it's washed with vegetable oil sometimes.
Yeah, yeah.
It's gee whiz,
Or
that's
it's
amazing.
rancid, and yeah. So
Yeah.
apparently the majority, or at least a large proportion anyway, was, I couldn't get an actual percentage, but is actually
No.
erythritol basically in disguise. But erythritol's it's funny because it's natural, but it's also
Yes.
artificial. So it's a really bizarre kind of
Yeah.
substance. It naturally occurs in some fruits, but often relatively low concentrations. It actually is produced in the human body, but very low concentrations.
Yeah.
And the typical amount in these products is about 1,000 times, the endogenous production in the human body, far more than you're going to get naturally occurring in fruits and so on as well.
So if you're
Typically,
trying to make a treaty birthday cake for someone, are you better to use just normal sugar or halve the
yeah,
sugar and eat the wheat and not use the almond meal?
I don't know. I
It's the
mean,
question I keep asking myself.
yeah, we don't know the answer because that hasn't been studied. But I honestly feel that we're probably better off eating the sugar than we are eating these artificial sweeteners,
Fake stuff, yeah.
because they're not washed in chemicals. They're not made in a lab.
Mm.
Nature has been evolving for hundreds of millions of years, and we have been evolving with it. And we have evolved some form of defense or whatever you want to call it against eating
Mm.
these kinds of foods in its natural form, because we would have at some point, and if it gave us a problem, we would have died out. So, but with these chemicals, like, no, we don't. We haven't evolved to eat chemicals. These are all
No,
artificially
exactly.
manufactured,
Yeah.
and
Wow.
we're messing with stuff. We don't know
Messing with
how these things affect the gut microbiome
no.
and so on as well. We know things like erythritol can cause severe abdominal cramps, bloating, diarrhea,
Yeah, yeah,
etc.
yeah. Well, there's always that warning, isn't
Yeah.
there? Don't eat too
So
many of these.
I I mean, the first thing I would say to people is, well, don't eat the sugar, don't eat the sweeteners.
Yeah.
If you absolutely have to, you're probably better off going with the
Go with the
natural,
natural substance. Yeah.
genuinely natural, stuff in its most unadulterated form is
Yeah.
what I would normally say to people. Yeah.
Yeah. Sometimes I think for me anyway, you know, my whole family is not a carnivore family. I'm eating way more meat and way less vegetables than I was even a week ago. It's changing all the time for me. The more I feel better, the less I want to eat the vegetables. But when you're out at a birthday party or, you know, a 60th wedding anniversary or something, and everyone's got their little bit of cake, I do let myself have a little bit of cake. I have a little tiny bit, but, you know, maybe that will change.
We can't
Who
be
knows?
perfect. We can't be perfect
We're just
24/7.
people, right?
You
Yeah.
know, we don't need to throw away the good for the perfect, you know.
Yeah, because it's the social aspect, I guess, which is always a touching point, isn't it?
There is a social point with food, and food, of course, you know, we celebrate with food, we commiserate with food. You know, every emotion we involve food. You know, I went to brunch the other day actually with my family, and I just didn't eat because there was nothing on there that I wanted to eat. And you know, it wasn't weird actually.
No, I have
It
done
was
that. It
weird that it
isn't
wasn't
weird, is
weird.
it?
Yeah,
It's
it
not
was
weird.
weird that it wasn't weird, and nobody cared. Like
No.
the waiting staff didn't care. The you know the people on table didn't care. My kids didn't care. Like I was just having a drink of water, just talking, conversing. Everyone was happy.
Everyone was happy and it was okay. You
Yeah,
didn't feel like the odd man out.
no,
You were all right.
didn't at all. No.
So sugar addiction is a huge, big problem in the world. We know this. We're all probably guilty of being in that pool of people. But of all the patients that you see that come to you, are you able to share what percentage would have a pre-diabetes? Like, is it always every day that you see a new person, or is it once a week, or how does that work?
Yeah, I mean, most days I see a new patient, and most of those, you know, new patients are often people who have, you know, health issues that have sought me out, either for the functional side or the metabolic, you know, side of things. Actual pre-diabetes, not super common actually.
Oh,
More common than it used to be. Definitely,
yes.
definitely.
In
Not
younger
super
people
common.
or
Yeah,
older or younger
definitely
people?
younger people, but also older as well. The
Yeah,
range is just getting really big.
yeah.
Because diabetes always used to be a kind of like if you were like 40 and then you either got diabetes or you kind of just didn't. Whereas now, like
Right,
I'm seeing new diagnoses of diabetes in 60-year-olds, 70-year-olds,
right. Type 2.
90-year-olds, yeah, type 2
Yeah.
diabetes. But also younger people as well.
Mm-hmm.
But what I see in almost every single patient is what I call pre-diabetes. So,
Yeah.
you know, very high
Ah,
levels of insulin resistance, you know, basically metabolic syndrome.
yeah. Oh,
Um,
okay. Yes, yes.
it's I probably diagnose like 4 people a day
True.
with
Goodness. That's a
metabolic
big
syndrome.
workload.
It's off the chart. It's
Oh.
absolutely off the chart. And it's almost always the same, you know. It's just it's the diet.
So when
Basically,
someone
it's
walks in the door to visit you, a new patient, and they've got a bit of metabolic problem, do they present physically just bigger people or a rounder waist or a puffy face or puffy ankles? Is there all
mm.
those high blood pressure? Is that what you look for? Is that
Yeah, I
what
mean
you
it
see?
varies. It
Yeah.
varies, of course, but typically, I mean, the typical stereotypical patient will be overweight. They'll have a high abdominal circumference, and they will have a high blood pressure. They probably have dyslipidemia, so their triglycerides are off, their cholesterol's
Ah,
up,
yes.
etc. And it's just this kind of picture. But almost always, symptoms-wise, they've got fatigue, tiredness, joint pains. They
Yeah.
feel older, maybe like 20, 30 years older than they should feel.
Yeah.
They can't lose weight, and often mental health issues as well,
Yes.
anxiety, stress,
Yes.
depression. With
Gosh.
women, it
Oh.
tends to be menstrual issues as well.
Yep.
Men, almost always, it's erectile dysfunction.
Yes.
That's the number one thing.
Gosh.
I said it before, I'll say it again 1,000 times. Sexual health really is a kind of an expression of metabolic health. Yeah,
Mm-mm-mm.
it
Right.
really is. So any man that's got erectile dysfunction, erectile issues, you know, you've probably got metabolic syndrome. basically.
Something's going
And
on.
you're not doing that well. Any woman that's got issues with her periods, regular periods, very heavy, painful periods, again, there's likely to be an issue. Not every single time, but likely there is.
Generally, a good
Yeah.
general rule of thumb.
Mm,
So
mm.
how do you advise those people on diet? Are you able to share what you would say? Do you just talk to them about carbohydrates, or do you go into the whole meat thing, or what's your
Yeah,
stance?
yeah. I mean, I tell patients that I do a carnivore diet, and if they want to discuss that, then we can. Obviously, if I'm seeing a vegetarian or vegan patient, they may not want to
Yeah.
discuss that, and that's totally cool. That's fine. I don't try and convert people
No,
in my
no, no,
consultation
no,
room.
no.
But I like to give them all of the options, and I speak to them about. I give them, like a sheet that I print out that gives them all the options of ways that we can treat it. And I
Yeah,
look at their zinc levels, for example. Zinc is extremely important with metabolic syndrome.
yeah,
Look at their zinc levels. Then we look at their testosterone, typically for men. Women, we might do hormonal assays as well, although they're not quite as useful typically. Their insulin resistance, their glucose levels, triglycerides, etc. And I give them a sheet of, okay, these are all the individual steps that we can take, but you don't have to do every single one.
yeah.
If you do, you'll be incredibly well and healthy. You'll get better
Mm,
quicker and you'll get better easier. But it might be a bit more work for you. Where do you think you lie on this scale,
yeah,
basically? And
yeah,
some of them just go straight in. I want to do everything. I want to be healthy. It terrifies me to have diabetes and so on.
yeah.
Others, they really hesitant and they need coaching, into that. So I don't go in hot and heavy with people. I just give them all the
Well, you
options.
can't, because people have
No,
to make their mind up for themselves, don't they? That's what I've found.
absolutely, they do. So I don't go in hot and heavy. I just give them all the options. And I don't usually do really that much on that first appointment. I just say, right, these are all the options. These are all some research things you can look at, go and absorb,
Yes.
go and read, go and
Yeah.
learn, come
Yeah.
back to me in a couple of weeks. We will talk more. You'll be more ready to make that change. You'll be more informed. You can then absorb this information and tell me how you want
Yeah.
to proceed.
Mm-mm.
And we will do whatever we can do to help you. And my kind of tagline really is, I can open the door for you, but I can't
Yeah.
walk through it for you.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
But I
Yeah.
can walk through it with you.
Mm-mm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think they kind of get that. Okay, yes, it's me that needs to make the change, but that I will help them on that journey.
And do you see lots of people making the change? Do you see good improvements in relatively short periods of time?
Absolutely. It depends. I mean, the more they do, the more benefit, you can get.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, I had one patient who basically cured himself of terrible type 2 diabetes within 2 months.
True.
Just
Wow.
yeah,
Wow.
his HbA1c was like 10.6 and it came down to 5.6. I
Oh,
think it was in,
goodness.
in about 2 months.
Yeah.
And I didn't even do that much with him. I just had one appointment. He said, right, I'm doing it. I'll come back in 3 months.
I'm coming
And he
back.
and
I'm
he
doing
and
this.
he
I'm
and he did
sorted.
it. He did it
Yeah.
basically. And it was like, okay, I didn't even have to do anything.
Yeah.
But others they do need coaching. But yeah, people are generally very keen to
Mm-hmm.
do it. And it's very interesting because I do talk to them about the zero carb. I call it zero carb. I call it
Yes.
zero carb,
Oh,
otherwise known as carnivore.
yeah. Yeah.
Because if you
Yeah.
just
I've
say
heard.
carnivore straight off, people go, "Oh, okay,
They
what's
get a
that?"
bit, it's a bit of a freaky idea.
Yeah,
Let's be
it
honest. It's a
is.
bit of a weird idea. It's like, what do
It's
you mean when
totally.
you first say it to people
I
that look
know.
at you like you're an alien? Yeah.
I know, totally. But that's when I think it helps that I say what I do it,
Yeah.
and you can kind of see
Especially
the
you. Yeah.
yeah they kind of when you say it they go ooh, and then when you say well I do it actually and it's amazing and they go oh really. And they kind
Then
of you
they're
can see their body
intrigued.
language, they lean into you and you can see they're actually
Oh,
intrigued. And then you
great.
can kind of, okay, well, do you want to talk about it? And they go, oh yeah, I just want to eat meat. Yeah, fantastic, I'll do that. Others, of course, they struggle a bit more with that idea. And so we meet them where they're at, low carb, keto, and so forth. I don't really
Yep.
force anyone to do anything.
Can you speak about what HbA1c means? Because I think some of our listeners might not understand what that test and insulin resistance test, what they might show to
Sure,
a patient. Because
absolutely.
those numbers, when you get them, they're there. You can't discount them. But what do they mean?
Yeah, so HbA1c is a measure of what we call glycosylated hemoglobin or glycated hemoglobin. And basically, the hemoglobin molecules are what carries around the oxygen in our red blood
In
cells.
your blood. Yep.
And the sugar basically glycates this hemoglobin. Very interestingly, fructose doesn't seem to affect HbA1c, which is very interesting, but
Right.
it
Yeah.
can affect insulin resistance. So HbA1c is what's typically used nowadays to either diagnose diabetes or to monitor diabetes.
Right.
The problem with HbA1c, and this is a difficult concept for some people to understand, is you can have a very good HbA1c, but bad diabetes.
Truly.
Now,
Truly, can you? Wow, I
I'll
didn't
explain
know
what I
that.
mean, because there's probably going to be people going, "What the hell is this guy on about?" No, you can't. That's not what it is. Well, what I mean by that is really in a holistic sense. So if you give the patient, just whack them on a load of insulin, right? You put them on a sliding scale insulin, and you control that blood glucose within an inch of their life. Their HbA1c will be amazing, but their diabetes, their insulin resistance will be through the roof.
Ah,
Their cardiovascular risk will probably be very high.
gosh.
Their pancreas will probably be shot, and their risk of things like cancer, because insulin is the biggest growth factor that we have in our
Yes.
body, and we
Yes.
know patients injecting insulin have a much higher risk of cancer.
Goodness.
So then you can have a good HbA1c, but as a whole, the patient is actually worse off.
If
So
they're
this
using
concept of
insulin. Yeah.
good HbA1c, bad diabetes. Now, insulin is just one example, of course, and some people do genuinely need insulin. I don't want anyone to go and stop their insulin
No, no,
if
no.
they're
Yeah,
listening
yeah,
to
yeah, for
this
sure.
without
Yes.
medical supervision. But yeah, HbA1c is not the only marker, of course, that we really should be looking at. We should be looking at people's overall health. And this is where other things like the waist circumference, the blood pressure, for
Mm,
example.
mm.
And you can put people on as many tablets as you like. You're never going to cure type 2 diabetes without a proper diet. It's just not going to
No.
happen.
Yeah.
You really just can't. You can control it, but again, you can still have these processes going on in the background. Effectively, the more sugar you eat, the higher your HbA1c will go, because the more your glucose is going to be higher in your blood. There's other things that can affect it. I mean, for example, today I had a patient whose HbA1c was quite high, yet their fasting glucose was very good. And,
Right.
they couldn't work out why. And I said, well, probably because you're anemic. And actually that can raise
Oh,
the HbA1c
yeah.
artificially. So there's other things that can contribute to this issue. So you can't really check it in people
You
with
got to
things like
check
sickle cell
the whole,
disease, for example,
yeah.
and so on. But then there's this concept of insulin resistance. And insulin resistance is effectively, people talk about it like two sides of one coin: hyperinsulinemia, so very high insulin levels, and then resistance to that insulin. And it's a funny thing within the body, and some parts of the body seem to become very hyper responsive to the insulin. Of
Yeah.
course, your fat cells, yeah, great.
Yeah,
Um,
great. I know,
you
right?
put on lots of weight. Although interestingly, they can become actually very non-responsive down the line, which is very interesting. Other parts become non-responsive and resistant to the insulin as well. Insulin resistance can be measured in a couple of ways. There is a very complicated thing called a euglycemic clamp test,
Right. Yes.
which is
Sounds very complicated.
it's a research thing. It's actually quite dangerous because you have to starve people, I think, for like 24 hours, then give them insulin infusions, drive their sugar down, then give them sugar boluses. Like, it's just really never done because it's
Yeah.
actually dangerous.
Yeah.
But it is the gold standard. Other people have tried to do things like the Kraft test, where it's like a
Yes.
glucose
Dr.
tolerance
Kraft.
test,
Yep. Yep.
but a different regimen and so forth. What most people do nowadays is what we call the HOMA IR test. And it's a relatively simple, it's a fasting glucose, fasting insulin, put them into
Yes.
a calculator, and it gives you an insulin resistance score. And it's pretty well validated for most people. And it gives you just a good indication of potential insulin resistance. But insulin resistance causes a lot of the problems that diabetes causes. And of course,
Yes.
type 2 diabetes is really the end stage of insulin resistance. But insulin
Okay.
resistance can cause all of those problems we teach in medical school, diabetes, heart disease, kidney disease, nerve problems, erectile dysfunction, sensory issues, all these things. Insulin resistance can cause all those things as well.
Yeah.
Maybe
Gosh.
not to this extent, but they can definitely cause them. And so that's why things like, if any man presenting with erectile dysfunction, until proven otherwise, they've basically got insulin resistance syndrome and metabolic syndrome. Yeah.
It's just there, isn't it? It's just there.
Yeah, basically.
Wow. So much knowledge coming out of you today. So I just wanted to quickly have a chat because I know you'd put on your socials just that you were doing the ribeye test or you're eating just ribeyes. How's that feeling and how did you come to settle on just the ribeyes?
Yeah.
Particularly.
Yeah. So basically, I wanted to kind of do this experiment, and people were asking me, like, why the hell are you just eating ribeye steaks? Like, what's going on here? And I said, well, I found out over the last 4.5 to 5 months that ribeye steaks just make me feel the best. Hard to explain. I just feel the best mentally. I feel the best physically after eating them compared to any other cut of meat, whether it's beef, lamb, chicken, whatever. I snack less. I feel less hungry.
Right.
I feel more motivated, and I sleep better. And I just want to work out and exercise.
Good.
And I just don't feel as hungry. Even eating, because people are like, oh, ribeyes are quite big. Well, yeah, they are. But even if I eat, say, like a kilo of chuck or half a kilo of ribeye, and they're about the same in terms of the macros, protein, fat, both about 50-50 by grams, 25-75 roughly by calories. I just feel less hungry when I eat the ribeyes.
Is the ribeye a bit more fattier? Is that a Scotch fillet?
So Scotch fillet is a rib fillet
with the bone. Yeah.
So rib fillet is technically without the bone. Ribeye is with the bone.
The bone, right.
They're meant to be the same, effectively the same cut, but I personally just find ribeyes tastier. I don't know why.
Tastier.
Maybe it's a psychological thing on the bone.
Just for you. Your microbiome's going, yes, please eat that.
I just find them, it's technically supposed to be the same, but I just find it better. But yeah, it's interesting because even if I eat half of what I would say the chuck, and a chuck's exactly the same amount of fat, I still just feel better on the ribeye, and I feel less hungry.
So chuck steaks more in my mind is. Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Cut quite across. No,
that's okay.
So chuck steak in my mind is more that you use in a slow cook, like a curry, or isn't it more like that? But you wouldn't put it in a curry. You would just cook it in the pan, or how do you
just slow roast it? Yeah, just braise it basically. Just slow roast it over maybe 2-3 hours, depending on the thickness and and so.
And so, do you buy it in a steak, chuck steak, not chopped?
No, I call it chuck steak, but it's a roast basically.
I know what you mean. I've got that in my freezer. Yeah. I know what you mean. So, I see it in my mind.
Yeah, lately we've been buying the ones from Woolworths just because it's a little bit cheaper and it's just like a flat kind of cut. So we just whack it in the air fryer on a low heat for like an hour. And then just eat it, and it's really nice. But
with butter?
No, I just eat it as it is, basically.
Yeah.
But I just find the ribeyes the best. So I wanted to kind of take this and just explore it and say, right, okay, like what happens if I just eat just ribeye? Because I feel the best on it. Will I stop feeling the best at some point?
Yeah, right.
What will actually happen?
Yeah.
Will my body say, please, actually, can you eat something different?
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, I can share a little bit about my journey so far. So I've been doing this now since pretty much like 2 days before March. So it's 9th of March today. So it's about 11 days I've been doing this now.
11 days, yeah.
Pretty much just eating ribeye. I have been drinking a bit of bone broth as well. But eating wise, purely ribeye. And yeah, I'm definitely starting to crave some other food.
True. Now you're thinking, okay. I'm out nearly.
I'm definitely looking at like some eggs or something would be quite good right now. I'm sticking with the ribeyes because I just want to kind of see what happens. But I'm definitely starting to crave some other foods. I'm definitely getting more deficient in my magnesium because I'm getting really bad cramps again.
Okay.
So I've noticed that is an issue. So I'm having to supplement magnesium now as well, which I have done in the past anyway, but it's definitely hitting me.
Is that at night time? Is that when you're asleep?
It's mainly at night, but it's during the day as well. Yeah, like I woke up at 3 a.m. the other day and it's just in agony.
I've done that.
I just ran straight into the bath, filled it with magnesium salts, and just kind of just jumped myself in the bath, just to get some magnesium into me. And then afterwards when I got like a magnesium drink as well to top it up as well. So that's definitely affected me there. Mentally, I feel amazing though, and I'm sleeping on the whole better. My energy levels are much
You
better.
look bright.
I look
You
bright,
look
thank
very
you.
bright.
That's good considering I hardly got any sleep last night because my kids woke me up loads overnight. Um, and I've lost a lot of weight. I've actually lost like 2 kilos
Oh,
in 10 to 11 days
gosh, okay.
as well, which is nice. And I'm pretty sure predominantly fat as well. Um, but yeah, I'm definitely starting to crave some
Yeah,
other
okay.
foods.
And
So
is the
I think
plan for a month, or what was your plan, or
I'd,
did you
I'd,
not
I'd
have one?
I'd planned for 30 days just because I wanted to see what happens basically. 30 days is long enough to see what's going to happen, not long enough that I'm going to cause myself any real harm.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And I don't recommend anyone out there just goes and eats one single thing for the rest of their life because you will get some deficiencies, I'm sure.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But I just wanted to see what would happen and how it actually went for me because I was starting to feel like, yeah, all I want is ribeyes. So I thought,
Yeah.
well, why not just try it and then just get it out of my system and B, just, well, what happens if I just eat,
Observe.
eat ribeyes? And will I actually start to crave other foods? And I think the answer is, yeah, I am starting to want other food.
That's something you've found out. So you do see people on telehealth. How do they actually get in touch with you if they'd like to have a consultation? Because we're in
Correct. Yeah,
WA, you're in Queensland.
absolutely. Yeah. So they can get in touch with me through my website. So drsuresh.com.au, or
Yep.
they can get in touch with me through my social media, of course.
Oh,
I've got
yes.
Yes, I've got links on my podcast and things as well. So the meatmedic.com
Oh, the
is
meat
my
medic, yes.
is my podcast, and there's links to my social and a link tree and things on there as
That's a
well.
cool name, the meat
Um,
medic. I like it.
yeah, thank you. I came up with it. I was actually originally going to do 2 podcasts when I started this. I'm glad I didn't because it's a lot of work.
Yeah.
One was going to be called Quest for Health, which was just like a generic kind of, let's be healthy kind of podcast. And then the other one was going to be the Meat Medic, which was about
Yeah.
carnivore life. And then I just decided, what, I'm just going to merge them because it's basically the same thing. And the Meat Medic I
Yeah.
thought was just a little bit more catchy.
Yeah, it's quite
Um, so
gritty with a bit of grit to it, like
a
the
little a
meat
little
medic.
bit,
I
yeah.
like it.
So I thought
Powerful.
I thought it was quite catchy. And so I'm on social media, all my social pretty much is at the Meat Medic. Apart from Facebook, is at Dr. Suresh Kawadka. But yeah, the meatmedic.com. If people want to go there, they can find me, and I do telehealth either through the clinics or out of hours private telehealth as well.
Good work. Good job. You're doing amazing work. Really, truly you are. We need
Trying.
more of you. We need more people like you. And you've actually mentioned before that your kids are eating more meat than,
Hmm.
and you've noticed a difference
Yeah,
in your kids in their
absolutely.
health and wellness.
Absolutely, yeah. So they're eating predominantly animal-based nutrition now.
Yeah,
They're not full carnivore. They're quite young, so between 2 and 7.
yeah,
So
yeah, yeah.
we try and let them eat fairly intuitively.
It's good.
So if they want a carrot, they go and get a carrot. If they want a piece of broccoli, whatever, they go get a broccoli. If they want an orange, they get an orange. If they want the meat, they want the meat. And we figure, well, if I follow that, and I think that works,
Good.
then I think that's good for them. But they're eating a lot more meat, a lot more fat than they used to. And yeah, we've noticed definitely their sleep's improved, their behavior on the whole has improved, their mental clarity has improved, their
Are
mental
they school
ability,
age? Are they
the
school
school
age?
age. Yeah.
Yeah,
So one of
yeah.
them's
Okay.
in daycare, 2 of them are in school, but
Yeah.
they're like just reading, writing, everything's improved dramatically. The end of school year slump just disappeared last year. As soon as we went on to a more meat-based diet, their school slump just disappeared
Just
overnight.
satiating, isn't it? Satiating in
Yeah,
your body
that's
when you
it.
eat it. Yeah.
But the
Yeah.
school still wants them, like we picked them up from daycare this afternoon, they'd fed them like Lamington cake and, so
Ah,
you can't control everything. But
no.
at the end of the day, like kids are going to be kids. You got to give them a
Yeah, they
little bit
do.
of this stuff. Otherwise, by the time they can eat it, then they're just going to go crazy on it. We're trying to teach them good eating habits. And I don't
Yeah.
think forcing yourself to go without anything is a good eating habit on the whole. Until you can understand what that food does to you, then it's your choice to go
Yeah. Yeah,
without.
exactly.
But
Exactly.
forcing people when they don't understand, I don't think is good. But then we tell them, like, well, yeah, your belly hurts because you ate all that cake.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. You
Okay?
can kind of
And
justify. Yeah.
then you know what cake does to you. Maybe you don't want to eat it anymore. And they do relatively self-regulate, actually.
I think kids are pretty onto it with all of this. They're more in tune with their bodies than what we are sometimes, because they're still young. They've still got their own mindset.
I think they absolutely are. And I've said this to people before, it makes you wonder, why do, very young kids violently at times refuse vegetables? Is it because they're just naughty, which is the prevailing theory, I think?
It's just, yes, what we all think, yes.
Or, I don't think kids are born naughty, really.
No,
or is it that they inherently know that these things might not be good for them? That they recognize these things are not as nutritious as we might think they are, that they recognize these are potentially toxic to them. Because of course, things like oxalates in broccoli and so on. What kid really wants to eat broccoli? Piece, like maybe a carrot, something.
Sometimes it can be quite bitter.
They're a bit low oxalate, but fruit, generally they'll eat fruit because it's maybe less toxic to them. But like if we ate a piece of broccoli, we're a lot bigger. A child is going to get hit a lot harder, especially if it's the first time they're eating it. And they just look at it and they go, yeah, I'm not sure about this. And then they taste it and it's just straight away like it's hit the wall. It's just out of their mouth. Maybe we should listen.
It's interesting, isn't it? It's when you introduce food to babies, sometimes they just don't want that veg. They just spit it straight back out at you, don't they? And you give them a lemon chop and they'll just munch it. Yeah, tastes good.
Exactly. You give them a piece of like ribeye or something, they'll be happy all day.
Let's chew on that.
Exactly. But it raises the question, if these things were so good for us, why would babies violently refuse them?
It's crossing my mind a lot lately because I've got a few little grandbabies and I watch them eating. I don't say anything or judge them or anything since they're not my babies, but I watch what they choose off the plates. It's generally the fruit and the meat. It's not the veg.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. All right. Well, I will let you get on with your day. Thank you so much for your time. Have you got anything else to share, or you're all shared out?
No, not really. I think, I just would encourage anyone that's listening, anyone that's watching this to, think for themselves, basically. And that's really my take home with my patients, with anyone that I consult with, anyone that watches my videos and episodes and so on, is I just like people to think for themselves. I just want them to work out what works for them.
Yes, it's important.
Out what causes them a problem, work out what makes them feel good. And if they don't genuinely feel good, make a change, because it's very easy to convince ourselves we feel good, or when someone asks us, do we feel good? If we don't genuinely feel good, make a change, basically.
Beautiful words. I like it. Thank you. All right, I will thank you for speaking with us and sharing your knowledge, and I guess we'll chat again at some point, because you're speaking at the Real Food, the Low Carb Roadshow in Queensland.
Correct. Yeah.
I saw you there.
Yeah. 20th of May, Low Carb Roadshow. I'll be talking on the carnivore diet, zero carb.
Really?
Yes.
Great. That's really
exciting. It's exciting.
All right. We'll speak to you again.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you, Linda.
Thank you.